Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Next Man Up podcast. I'm your host, Bandon Crowley. I have my co-host with me, Colin Martin.
How's it going?
And today we got a few things to talk about. The Western Conference Finals have officially finished, and the Eastern Conference Finals, the Celtics are on the brink of elimination. So we'll talk about that. We'll start off in the West, though, since we already have the winner of that. The last time that we talked, the Nuggets, I believe, were up 2-0. And now they've officially swept the Lakers, winning Game 4 as they'll advance to their first finals in franchise history. I guess some initial reactions to this. I forget what the odds were, but ESPN's odds overall for these series have been terrible the whole time. So I forget what they gave the Lakers. I think they gave them a 53% chance or something like that after, even though they were down 2 games. But the Lakers couldn't get a game, even though they had a chance to win pretty much every single game at one point in the fourth quarter. You could just tell that the Nuggets were the better team. They made the plays that they needed to when they needed to, and they just took advantage of what the Lakers gave them. And the Lakers kind of went out there and they did come back in most of these games, or they were up in most of these games too, but they just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, and I mean, we came on here and we talked about this series a lot. Obviously, it was kind of a matchup that we didn't really see coming. I mean, the Nuggets, a lot of people thought of them as maybe a fraudulent 1 seed, especially going up against a team like Phoenix early on. And this Lakers team, which, I mean, a lot of people had faith in. I was not one of them, but I mean, shoot, they pushed it to the Western Conference Finals. So seeing these two teams go head to head was a little weird. I thought the Nuggets would win in 5. I was pretty confident in Denver just because of the matchups with LA. But I will give the Lakers some credit here where the Lakers had, really good performances. I was really impressed with Anthony Davis and Austin Reeves in particular, even in a losing effort. So, you can pull a lot from this series, but at the end of the day, I mean, Denver handled business. They were the better team, but I don't think all was lost for the Lakers. Being the 7th seed, making the Western Conference Finals, you got to give them some credit where it's due.
Yeah. And this series kind of reminds me of, I think it was last year's series between the Celtics and the Nets in the first round. The Celtics ended up sweeping them, but every single game was close. And especially going into Game 4 of this series, I mean, LeBron had a chance to tie it at the end, but obviously everyone in the arena knew he was getting the ball, and they took advantage of that. And usually we see LeBron pass up on those opportunities because he gets doubled every time. But in that opportunity there, with that many seconds left, everyone knew he was going to take the shot. But the Nuggets are going on to their first finals in franchise history. As the 1 seed in the West, like you said, a lot of people didn't expect to see them going up against the 7 seed. Same thing in the East with a 2 and an 8 seed. It seems like we still had one of the best teams in each conference, and then a surprise team for many with the Lakers and the Heat overall. LeBron talking about retirement, and it seems like this is really only a topic because this is the first time that we've ever heard him talk about that. It seems like in his career, everyone said, oh, well, we don't know how many years he has left. But this is the first time where he's actually said in an interview that he's thought about retiring. But then he also said that he still feels like he's better than 90 to 95% of players in the NBA. And if we're talking about percentage-wise, 450 players in the NBA, he's still in the top 97%, in my opinion. I still think he's a top 10 player, probably better than that. I mean, he put up almost a 40-point triple-double at age 38. So I think he still has some years left. I did see an interesting idea where he could take a year off and then play with Bronny, but I still think he has a lot left in the tank overall. And I think he's kind of just saying this, especially with how much Rob Pelinka has been hesitant to do anything to make the team better, which he eventually gets convinced, but it takes a lot of convincing for them to do anything to trade their future away. But we'll have to see what happens with the Lakers going forward. The Nuggets are going to end up playing against either the Heat or the Celtics. And Jokic, obviously amazing in this series. I think he had a triple-double in every single game. I'm not sure statistically, but I'm pretty sure he did. Whether he did or he didn't, it was...
Yeah, I mean, I'll step in right here while we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. I mean, Jokic, 3 out of the 4 games had a triple-double. And in Game 3, where he was struggling to start out with, that's when Jamal Murray stepped up more than we ever could have expected. I think that's what makes this Denver team so dangerous. And I want to come on here. I mean, we get clicks when we talk about the Lakers. You know, a lot of people are Lakers fans, are interested in what's going on with the team. But I really want to sit here and talk about the Nuggets for a little bit because for a one seed in the West, a convincing one seed, they've got disrespected all year. I mean, Jokic was top 2 in the MVP voting the whole season. At some points, won, obviously ended the year in second place, but he was almost better than every other year. And this is a 2-time MVP we're talking about. I mean, the fact that we can see a guy in game one of a series go for 34, 21, and 14, and then in the closeout game go for 30, 14, and 13, that's some superstar stuff. I mean, all credit to LeBron, all-time great, greatest of all time, whatever you want to call it. Those are stats that we would look at LeBron and marvel in. And it seems like Jokic doesn't get that same respect all the time. And Jamal Murray, I'm going to come on here and say he's a borderline top 20 player in the NBA. He's unbelievable. You know, say what you will about skating by him the regular season, but he's a playoff performer. And he doesn't get enough credit for it. You look at a guy like Kawhi Leonard in the past would go, oh, you know, he doesn't do a whole lot in the regular season, but wait for the postseason. That's Jamal Murray. I mean, it's unbelievable. Just all playoffs. He's taken some heat off of Jokic. When Jokic has a bad game, which 24, 6, and 8 is not a bad game, but by MVP standards, it is. Murray is right there ready to ball. And he scored the most first half playoff points in like the modern era or something just the other night. And we didn't even talk about it. It's unbelievable. You know, I actually like this Lakers team much more than I used to. I think they built themselves a future just based off this one trade deadline. But this Nuggets team is the future, and their guys aren't going anywhere. I mean, they only rock a 6-7 man rotation, and these guys are under contract, and they're going to stay around for a long time. This Nuggets team is dangerous. I mean, we're going to talk about the East pretty shortly, but I don't know if a team in the East, any team in the East, could touch the Nuggets right now.
Yeah, it seems like we've talked about it almost every year. They've kind of fallen short of expectations every year. Last year, obviously, they were a lower seed, but it seems like they would do really good. And it seems like this is finally their year with everything going on. We talk about every single year. We even saw the Bucks this year ended up dealing with a Giannis injury and losing in the first round against the Heat, who are potentially going to be in the finals. But it takes a lot going into every single year. You can be the best team, but it doesn't matter. The playoffs come down to star players, injuries. There's so many variables, and the Nuggets are coming out of the West as the best team this year. They ended up beating the Lakers, who ended up beating the Warriors, and the Nuggets obviously getting through the Timberwolves in the first round. Very easy series. Timberwolves, not a good team, but the Nuggets struggled in one of the games, ended up losing, but that's just how the first round goes. Teams have to feel themselves out, but in this series, not really struggling at all. You would say at some points, maybe letting the Lakers come back, but when the fourth quarter came around, even if they ran the same exact play every possession, it worked every single time with a pass and go. And they were obviously the better team in this series, coming down the stretch and making the better plays.
Yeah. And just to, I want to give a final shout out to these Nuggets role players that have stepped up because, it's not really fair to just talk about Jokic and Murray, for my analysis, because, we see guys like Christian Brown, especially Bruce Brown, Jeff Green. These are guys that have kind of lost their footing and not really found a place in the NBA, or in Christian Brown's case, I just got drafted way later than people may have expected on a championship Kansas team. And they have been amazing contributors to this Nuggets team. Aaron Gordon's one of the most underrated players in the league right now. He's the whole reason the Nuggets even won game 4. And obviously we can talk about Michael Porter Jr. and KCP, who, on any given night can shoot the lights out. This Nuggets team is not, despite what Twitter or Instagram or, anybody online might tell you, the Nuggets aren't some, flimsy team that coasted their way here. This Nuggets team is dominant. And, when I'm looking at doing research of some of, these all-time great championship teams, the Nuggets might not be right there, but they're a lot closer than people are going to give them credit for. So you can't count on that yet. We're going to talk about the East. One of these teams can come in and knock Denver out. But I mean, just on what I've seen, this Nuggets team is hard to touch, really hard to touch.
Yeah. And speaking going into the offseason, obviously the Lakers have a few different things they can do. We talked about the Warriors dynasty potentially being over. The Lakers too, with an aging LeBron. It seems like he has taken a few steps back, obviously still dropping 40, but I don't know if he can really hold up for a full game at the level that we've seen him. He did play the full game and drop 40, but there is definitely moments that we look at him and say that he might have taken a little step back. So he may not be the best player anymore. He may still be a top 10 player, but with Anthony Davis, you don't really know what you're going to get. Austin Reeves has been great too, but it feels like, especially in the West, with the way that these teams are built, you really got to go and try to get some depth on this team, whether you go for a star player in Kyrie, who I don't really think they will go for, just because I don't know how well the fit is, especially with the way that LeBron and Kyrie kind of went out last time. I think it would definitely benefit a little more just going through some more depth if you build off of LeBron and AD, because Austin Reeves proved that he can be a third scoring option in these playoffs. I'd say they probably just end up trying to get a point guard after D'Angelo Russell just didn't even want to play in the playoffs overall.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Also, I mean, just to throw my 2 cents in on that, Austin Reeves is going to get a contract close to $100 million from another team. It falls in the Lakers' hands if they want to match that. And I'm sure Austin Reeves would love to come back, but it's one of the bigger decisions of the offseason. You know, I give him a lot of credit. He showed up in the playoffs when a lot of people thought he might just be a regular season fluke shooter. But the Lakers have a lot of decisions to make. Are you going to roll with LeBron and AD? I assume you will, but you got to get the parts around him. You mentioned Kyrie. I know a lot of people like to talk. I don't even know. People want to say Kuzma's coming back. There's a lot of moving pieces on this Lakers team. And if you're in Los Angeles, you want to build on this run. You don't want this to be a fluke run. And, you know, in LeBron's later years or whatever, you want to build on this. And it's up to this offseason if the Lakers will. You know, this team played much better than a 7th seed, but you got to get the players so you can be better than the 7th seed. You know, give yourself an easier road to a Western Conference Finals. If the Lakers were in the Nuggets position, they were a 1 seed, a 2 seed, who knows how this series goes? You know, they got beat up all the way here. So this offseason is where you build on this, and this is where a lot of decisions are made. It's always a fun offseason in Los Angeles, but this one maybe more than ever.
Yeah. So moving over to the East, we now have the Heat and the Celtics, and the Heat are up 3-1 as of this recording. The Celtics avoiding the sweep last night, and Marcus Smart said, "Don't give us one." Jaylen Brown said the same thing, and especially with the people that were in the crowd for that game, you might want to get them back in the crowd for Game 5. This is a very interesting series, especially with the way that everything has gone down with Jimmy Butler, Grant Williams, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. There's so much going on in this series overall. And I know there's a lot of conflicting opinions on this, especially when people looked at the Lakers series. It seemed like everyone was like, oh, LeBron could make history. But it almost seems like there's a lot more belief in the Celtics, which obviously makes sense. They're going against a Heat team that has been really good, but the Celtics are the better team overall. So going into Game 5, going into TD Garden, I made a TikTok about this today. I think that the Heat being an 8-point underdog in this game is absolutely disrespectful. You're talking about a team that went into TD Garden and beat down the Celtics in Game 1 and in Game 2. And for them to go back in Game 5 after the Heat took an L in Game 4 at home, it just, I don't understand why it's an 8-point spread in this game. If you're really that confident in the Celtics to win, I guess that makes sense. But to say that the Celtics are going back home and it should be an easy game because it's at home, they've been shaky, to put it like very nicely, at home. So I don't really understand what's going on there. If the Celtics can get this back to Game 6 in Miami, then I think Miami starts to feel the pressure a little bit. But, well, especially if you get to Game 7 too. But I think, personally, I think the Heat will close this out in Game 5. If not, keep it close and then close it out in Game 6. I don't think this is going to 7 in Boston. I think the disrespect of the Heat, especially in Game 5, is not warranted at all, especially with Jimmy Butler and the rest of this team.
Yeah, I mean, coming from me, who is a Celtics fan, I do agree with that statement. I think, you know, if you think the Celtics can pull off the miracle run, you know, you at home watching this, I respect it. But to consider them favorites in any of these games would be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Boston has been outplayed in every single game except for, you know, as we record this, or just in general, Game 4. And even then, they got outplayed the whole first half. It was a great second half run from Boston to keep themselves alive. But I think I'm going to come on here and do this, which I hate doing because I don't want to be the podcast that hates on players. I don't want to be that guy, especially because last time I was up here, I was talking about Jason Tatum and how we shouldn't hate on him and how we should respect him. But when are we going to talk about Jaylen Brown? When are we going to talk about him? Because it's unbelievable to me. He is the second option on this team, and his career only averages 18 points per game in the playoffs. That's fine. But if we're going to get into arguments about Jaylen Brown being better than Jason Tatum or, being this guy that should get, a star treatment, that is ridiculous to me. And if we talk about this series in particular, he's not shooting more than 40% from the field. That is unbelievable. He is putting up Russell Westbrook numbers I'm talking worst Russell Westbrook numbers and getting no flack for it. I mean, I can't believe it. It's no matter the game, he is either in foul trouble or having way too many turnovers. And if not one or the other, it's both. It's never neither. It's just a ridiculous showing from a player that I've heard all year is the best player on the Celtics. And when I watch it, it's a much different story. I mean, people want to compare this team to the 04 Red Sox that came down 3-1, first team in baseball to ever come down 3-1 in the playoffs. This is much harder and much different for the Celtics. It would be much more historic. I give them that, but they're not coming down 3-1. They don't have any leverage. They're coming down 3-0. Obviously, the series is 3-1 now after catching a game in Miami, but as you mentioned, I think it's great analysis. TD Garden isn't the mecca for the Celtics to win like it used to be. The Celtics have proven that they can go into TD Garden in important games and lose. So why do we assume that going back to TD Garden is an automatic W for the Celtics? I think it's ridiculous, and I hate to talk bad about my own team because I do believe, really, I really think that this could happen, but it would take a big change. It's not this team as they're playing right now cannot make this comeback. The Celtics need to have some heart. They need to get it in themselves, and that should start with the coach. But what we see him from Mazzulla in the playoffs, that's going to start with Tatum. And I think he's been playing well. I think he's, pulling himself back, especially after the first 3 games, kind of choking, not being able to get shots up in the fourth quarter. I think last night was big for him, but it's going to cause a major change. I mean, there needs to be something big that happens here if we really think the Celtics can come back 3-0, but it's looking a little bleak. It's not looking as, promising as people might want to tell you.
Yeah, and if we're talking about starting with a coach, I mean, Joe Mazzulla already said he lost the locker room, so it seems like the players are just playing for themselves at this point. And we'll see what happens going into Game 5 in TD Garden. But you mentioned this a few times almost. It seems like Celtics fans are kind of spoiled at this point, expecting a championship when statistically, since the merger, they've been swept in more series than they've won championships. So only 4 championships since the merger. And it seems like this team is expected to win a championship every year. I don't know where the expectation came from. Like, if we're looking at this team, obviously it's a great team, but it seems like obviously historically it's not like they're destined to win a championship. It's been a while. It's been over a decade now since they've won a championship. And especially with this duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they've been to 4 Eastern Conference finals to this point, only getting to 1 finals. And we know how that went last year in the finals. So especially with the Celtics back against the wall, when we come on here next week, if the Celtics are done, I mean, we've talked about Jaylen Brown's impending free agency this whole time. And going into this series after they beat the Sixers, it was kind of not obvious, but it seemed like a little more obvious that he would stay with the Celtics since we expected them to make the finals, not easily, but at least be able to get through the heat. But with the way this team is playing now, it's really up in the air with Jaylen Brown. There's a lot of different options for him, and we'll just have to see what happens with him. But there's a lot of teams too that are looking for a guy like him. And if he thinks his worth is being able to be a star player on a team, there's definitely teams that will pay and trade for him in this offseason.
Yeah. What I will say, though, is that if Jaylen, this is why I hate doing this, because I still think Jaylen Brown is a great player. He hasn't had the best moments in the playoffs, and, I'm not a fan of that. But with that being said, I think the Celtics would definitely be in the best interest bringing him back, and I think it would be in his best interest as well, which that's not even just me talking as a fan. But if we look historically at teams with young duos like this, the Celtics have a lot of playoff experience because this duo has overachieved their whole careers until right now, where it seems like they're underachieving a little bit. but it takes time. We haven't seen a duo this young lead a team to the finals since I want to say like 1980 with Magic Johnson and a younger Kareem. I mean, these players aren't Magic Johnson and Kareem, but you understand the comparison. They have a lot of years left in the tank. And, if Celtics fans and people regarding the Celtics and media had a little more, timid expectations, they would be on the right track right now. But because these guys have had so much playoff experience, we expect a lot. Sometimes things just come with age, especially playoff experience. And I think that could be in Jaylen Brown's favor. If he chooses to go, I understand the money's not going to look that much different at the end of the day. And he would be able to lead his own team or, prove himself without Tatum. But if we're talking about his best chance to win a championship and the Celtics' best chance to win a championship, they have to stay linked together and build more around them, which I know they already have great supporting players. But when I say build more, I think you need security at the head coaching position, whether you ensure Missoula or you go a different direction. You need to have someone that's stable. Obviously, the Ime Udoka thing kind of screwed the Celtics this year. And more stability in the front court. It's not Rob's fault that he's always hurt, but Rob Williams being out, Al Horford being inconsistent, and then having no options off the bench. It's not a great position for the Celtics. With that being said, I'm talking a lot about the Celtics because, I'm a fan, but I really think we should start talking about the Heat more. I know you would love to. I think we should start giving them some more credit.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Butler has solidified himself as one of the greatest playoff performers in history, especially with this run, and especially after last year when he was interviewed after Game 7, losing in the Eastern Conference Finals. He said, we'll be in this exact same position next year, and we're going to go out there and win. And it seems like as of right now, that's what's going to happen. I don't think the Celtics will be able to come back in this series. Obviously, they're the better team, but it doesn't seem like they really want to play. In Game 3, they completely gave up by the third quarter, not even by the end of the third quarter, just halfway through the third quarter. 33-point lead, and Duncan Robinson's going out there shooting logo threes just for fun. And they put in their whole entire G League roster at that point. And Joe Mazzulla, like we said, has lost the locker room. And the dynamic between Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Marcus Smart, we've heard stories about this for years, going back to the bubble when Marcus Smart was calling them out and throwing chairs around the locker room. There's been a million different things that we've heard about from these guys. And it seems like with Jason Tatum, he should obviously be the leader of this team. He's the best player, but it reminds me a lot of Embiid. Just because the best player on the team is there and everyone knows he's the best player, that doesn't automatically make him a leader, especially when Marcus Smart feels like he is the leader. It's usually hard to take that role away from a guy who kind of demands himself to be the leader no matter what. And that's not a fault to Jason Tatum. Obviously, I think he definitely has the leadership skills and we've seen him step up in opportunities. But the dynamic between those three, we've seen a million different stories about it throughout the past 5-6 years. So with this team and the way they're playing, and it seems like they just don't even want to be there at a lot of moments on this whole entire playoff series, and even just in the playoffs in general, and even in the regular season. Obviously, they had a really good regular season record, but there were instances like in mid-February or March where Jason Tatum goes on an 0 for 20 3-point shooting streak. And obviously Jaylen Brown can have some bad games in a row too. And Marcus Smart, he'll either go out there and play his heart out one game or just kind of stand around for one game. There's been concerns with this team all year, especially in the playoffs, especially stemming off of last series. And if I'm a Heat fan in this scenario, after the Celtics just won that game, I wouldn't be nervous going into this next game. I think once you get to Game 6, then you get a little bit nervous, but they've proven that they can win in TD Garden, and you have Jimmy Butler out there. At the end of the day, I think, especially last game, one of the key factors for the Heat is Max Strus. If he goes out there and drops 15 points, it's going to be really hard to beat them. And he had a bad game. He had 9 points, and the Heat have relied on that bench and those role players, and they just didn't really perform last game. So I wouldn't be too worried with them. If I was a Heat fan, I still think they'll definitely come out of this series too. But I guess it'll be interesting to see if the Celtics can push them to another game.
Yeah. And just to kind of bounce off that, shout out to the players on the Heat that have made a role for themselves, even if it's not a scoring role. Obviously, guys like Robinson and Strus, those are guys that are there to shoot the ball. But even guys like Caleb Martin, he's been having amazing point totals when he's not necessarily a pure shooter. Got a great jumper, but he affects the game defensively more than anything. So, and even Lowry got pushed to a bench role, but he's playing so well off that bench role, it doesn't even matter, and he took it well, which for a lot of vets his age that have started their whole career, being said, hey, you're going to be benched, that would kill them. And with Lowry, it almost seems like it's improved his game. So shout out to those guys. I mean, the Celtics, you can see the numbers. They have a tough hill to climb, especially against a team like the Heat that has proven that they're really that good. So, as a fan of the Celtics, it's not looking great right now, but I think it's fun to have some faith. Maybe they could climb all the way back, but that's one of those things where it would take a lot. So I understand, Heat fans should probably feel good as well. I wouldn't blame them.
Yeah, I think with the way that both of these teams are kind of set up and what we've seen, we're seeing a team that is putting everything out on the floor one game and just completely looking like they don't want to be there the next game, versus a team that is so connected and like woven together no matter what. I mean, we've seen Jimmy Butler in, it seems like every single play, he's always saying something to his teammates. He's always trying to get people fired up, especially with the guys coming off the bench, because we know Duncan Robinson can have a good game one game and a bad game the next game. Or if it's pretty much anyone else, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, all those guys that kind of play that 3-point shooting role for them. Some of them are going to have bad games, but it seems like Jimmy Butler's always there to help talk them up. And if I'm looking at this series, I'm not going to count out Blackman and Robin. I think they're one of the best duos, especially in these playoffs. And Jimmy Butler said it himself. When him and Cody Zeller are out on the floor, it's really hard to stop them.
I don't have much to add to that, but I mean, this Heat team, I think you said it perfectly. This Heat team, they have each other's backs, and there's never a moment where, it seems like they're not on the same page on the court, which even though the Celtics team, I would say is a better squad, they have those moments all the time. You just see a guy look uninterested. And that's one of my faults with Jaylen Brown. Maybe that's why I get so heated, because he's such an incredible player. He's a top 15 talent, easy, but he just looks confused sometimes. And it's not because of his intelligence. This guy's probably the smartest dude in the league. It's just because I don't feel like he's connected out there with the other guys. It's a problem the Heat don't have. And that's the way that this series went from, oh, Miami takes the first game and Boston builds it back. No, Miami was so connected that they could go out and win the first 3 games. And now we're talking about this miracle run that Boston would have to stop them. So, give credit where it's due, but I wouldn't fully count out Boston yet. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if they can push it to a game 6, crazier things have happened from them.
Yeah. So I guess looking forward to, we can talk about the finals a little bit going into next week. If we do see a Heat versus Nuggets final, I think that looks very different, obviously, from a Celtics and Nuggets final. Especially with kind of what we saw from the Nuggets last series. I know you'll probably have a different opinion, but there were definitely moments where the Lakers could have won, and the Nuggets kind of took advantage of the Lakers not being able to get that done. If they go against a team like the Heat, where we've seen them down in pretty much, it seems like every single series, they've been down by 10 to 12 points at some point in most of these games, and then they just find a way to finish it. I don't think the Nuggets completely run through the Heat. I've said that the Heat will lose every single series so far. I didn't even have them coming out of the play-in tournament, and they almost didn't. They were very close to, one game away from not even being in the playoffs, and now they're one game away from being in the finals. This team, I want to say that the Nuggets should win this, especially with just the fact that their team is built so well overall. And this is finally kind of the year that they're seeing everything come together. But with Jimmy Butler on the opposite side, I can't count him out. So I think if the Heat do go on, it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens, especially with the way that the Heat and Celtics series ends. If the Heat can get it done in game 5 relatively easily, like we've seen in most of their wins, then that's very different. But if they kind of get battled a little bit and maybe only win in 6 or 7, then it's a different story because the Nuggets obviously have almost a week plus off at this point until the final start. So it'll be a very interesting dynamic to see that as the finals don't start until June 1st. So both teams could have a week off, but the Heat could have less of a break too if it ends up going to 6 or 7.
Yeah, and in the Western Conference Finals, I was big on saying, "Oh, the Nuggets are going to smack the Lakers because they're just so much better built as a team." I don't have the same sentiment for the Heat. I know the Heat are a lower seed than the Lakers are, but the Heat are a well-built team. You know, they've made this run because they were a championship contending team just last year, and the team looks very similar right now. You know, it's a team that we know that can compete. We're not doing official predictions yet because nobody's matched up with the Nuggets yet. If it was the Heat, though, I said Nuggets in 5 against the Lakers. I was close. I would say Nuggets in 6 or 7 against the Heat, depending on how they close things out against the Celtics. I think the Nuggets are a much better team, but I mean, the Heat have made their whole playoff run beating teams that I think are much better teams. So I'll give respect where it's due, of course. You know, this Miami team is tough. I hate them because I'm a Celtics fan, but when we sit here and talk about it, it's nothing but respect. It's an incredible team. So I think that'd be a great matchup. Based on what I've seen from the Celtics in this series, I would rather have a Heat Nugget series because it would be better basketball, just to be blatantly honest with you. So if the Celtics don't pull it back, I think it's going to be a competitive finals. And hopefully people on the internet shut up and can just be happy that we're getting 2 good teams playing basketball. It frustrates me how we've wanted change in the league. We want things to be fair. We wanted more teams to compete. And now that more teams are finally competing, everybody's angry. I guess that's a story for a different day, but I think that no matter what the finals matchup is going to be, it's going to be tough. It's going to be 6, 7 games, and it's going to be good basketball. And that's all you can really ask for as a fan.
Yeah, I think overall, depending on where you look to, especially through places like ESPN, they're promoting this Celtics and Lakers finals so much that it seemed like, especially when both teams were down 3-0, it almost seemed like that's what was going to happen. We were going to get 2 4-0 comebacks and have the Lakers and Celtics, but it seems like the way that these series have gone on, especially with the Nuggets running through the Lakers and the Heat being a game away from the finals, we're getting a different matchup than pretty much everyone expected going into this playoffs. A lot, including you, expected the Nuggets to be there, but the Heat, I don't know very many people who expected them to even make it out of the first round. But I kind of relate this to the World Series last year. The Heat could end up having the same fate as the Phillies did, going on this Cinderella run, making it to the final, and then ending up playing against a team like the Nuggets, who compare them to the Astros, just overall great in every single facet of the game. But you never know. Jimmy Butler could rewrite history and get probably, I don't know if it's undoubtedly, but at least one of the greatest rings of all time. I don't know.
Absolutely.
There might be some people who would argue that. I think I would say the closest one up there is Hakeem, but Jimmy Butler is, undoubtedly probably the greatest ring of all time. I would say probably up there with Hakeem and the Lakers bubble ring.
Yeah, shout out to Dirk if we're going to talk about a real run, but no, I agree with you. We can't forecast too far, we don't record the podcast every day or anything, but if we get to a point where we're talking about the Heat, in the finals with the Nuggets and the Heat can pull it off, I would say absolutely the greatest ring ever. Nothing compares to an 8th seed just being willed to the finish by great coaching, teamwork, and individual performance. It checks all the boxes.
Yeah. And I think, I guess going forward, even if the Heat win or lose, obviously winning makes it look a lot better. But I think Erik Spoelstra has solidified himself as top 10 coach of all time. He's been able to be, when you look at guys who can make adjustments, it's him, and there's a lot of guys that are really good at it, but he's at the top of the pyramid. You go out there and no matter what happens, no matter what a team throws at you, the Heat just go out there, and it seems like they have a guy who can go out there and guard whoever they need to do, run whatever play they need to do. And especially with, half of this team didn't even get drafted in the NBA, but they've been able to fill out their roles and just play whatever they need to do, especially led by Jimmy Butler, who 5 to 10 years ago, when he was going through all this stuff with the Timberwolves, almost being blackballed from a lot of teams. They didn't want him there. And now we kind of see where he was coming from. And it seems like there's no doubts anymore that Jimmy Butler is a fantastic leader.
Yeah, I think that's a great take, especially about Coach Spo. I mean, if he can win a ring with this team this year, that's borderline top 5 for me. So I don't have a ton to add to that, but I appreciate the respect. I think it's warranted.
Yeah. So with that being said, the Heat 1 win away from the finals, or we could see the Celtics come back and make history. One of them will meet against the Nuggets in the NBA Finals. And by the time we come back next week, we'll have a team that will be in the finals. We'll come out with some official predictions, and we'll have a lot to talk about going into that series. So until then, we'll see you in the next episode.
Peace out, guys.